Hey there, everybody. I am here with Dale Hunt and Dr. Ethan Russo here the day before Emerald Cup here in Santa Rosa. And I was very pleased that Dr. Russo reached out to me last week to let me know that he's got a new project that he's very excited about and working on with Dale. And he said, hey, why don't you come by the Airbnb on Friday before the Emerald Cup and we can talk about it today on video before they announce the new project tomorrow at Emerald Cup. So guys, thank you for the invitation, and I was excited to hear the bit I have heard so far about the new project. I think, Dale, you're going to start it off by giving us a little bit of context, the elevator talk, if you will, about
Sure.
what the new project is.
Okay. Well, as you know, I'm a plant scientist who became a patent attorney, and I've worked with plant breeders for my entire career. As I became more and more immersed in the cannabis industry, I had multiple conversations with breeders. They would always follow a similar pattern. The breeder would tell me about something great that they've done and ask me how I would go about protecting it, and I'd tell them, okay, that's easy, I know how to do that. And then we would get on to the steps and the process and the cost, and it would become evident that they were not in any position to pay. And even if they did pay, they may not have the right opportunities, business opportunities, to do anything with the IP once they had it. After a few of these conversations that all kind of went the same way, I realized that what the industry needs is something like a record company, where the breeder is the singer, the songwriter, the artist. And if you think of a great musician, they only have to be great at being a musician. They don't have to be business people. They don't have to be good at the legal part. They just have to be really good at what they do, and they have to have a passion for it. And then a good record company takes care of the rest and takes very good care of the musicians and keeps them happy and makes sure they get paid well, on and on. So I was thinking, all right, we have a population of amazing breeders who've been just devoted to the plant, in many cases for decades, and they are not being, they don't have the right opportunities to get their work out to people, out to the world. And so we want to do something that can fix that. We want to offer them opportunities to protect their intellectual property. They would continue to own the intellectual property. And then this new venture that we're starting, which we're calling Breeders Best, is our way of, we become the licensee of the breeder, and then we take that license and find the right partners to cultivate the plant and create the medicines or create the products that can be made from these amazing cultivars that these breeders have developed. And then they get a royalty for as long as anyone is buying the plant or the products or the flower or whatever it is that they're buying. All they have to do is be good at breeding, and it's our goal that we would take care of the rest.
One of the things that I find really attractive about this business model is that the ownership of the intellectual property of the plant genetics stays with the original breeder. It doesn't change hands to you. You are simply licensing it to them instead of you becoming the owner. And so if I understand it right, if you ever find yourself in a position where you're not able to make royalties for the original breeder, that they can go ahead and take it and go on to their next venture with it.
Yes.
Do I have that understanding correctly?
Absolutely, 100% correct, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think, and that may be different from the model of at least some record companies. I think they do end up acquiring the rights. I don't know who ends up owning the copyright. It probably depends on the company, but I think it's really important that the breeder continue to own the IP. We're in an industry and a culture where there are a lot of trust issues, and it erases one potential question, one potential problem. We will do we'll do great with the opportunity to have a license to their IP, but if we don't find a good outlet for it, or we're not able to meet the minimums that we build into the agreement, then that will revert back to them. The rights, the ownership will always be with them, but the rights would revert back to them, and they could do something else with it.
Mm-hmm. So, Ethan, I know you have been a big proponent for whole plant medicine just for all time, and as we see pharmaceutical companies coming in contact with the cannabis plant more, they seem to be reverting to these solutions that are all single molecule, breaking up the plant, taking it into its discrete parts, and then kind of making a cocktail and hoping that they can get FDA approval for it. And you've never really taken a shine to that approach. Would you explain for us why it's so important in your eyes to work on whole plant medicine to the degree that you're taking on this big project with Dale?
Sure. Well, I felt for many years that the real key to botanical medicine, medicine from plants, the strength of it lies in the synergy, the boosting of ingredients, what's come to be known as the entourage effect. So this is the idea that we have soloists, to carry on the musical analogy, perhaps THC and CBD. Their medical attributes are greatly enhanced by the addition of these other components in an extract, say, from the plant, as opposed to single molecules. So, for example, CBD is a great medicine, but what we're finding is for certain indications like treating seizure disorders or schizophrenia that huge doses are necessary. And this poses two problems. One is cost and availability, and the other is the possibility of drug-drug interactions at these very high doses. As I'm fond of saying, there's nothing that cannabidiol does that isn't enhanced by having at least a little bit of THC with it. Not to mention the enhancements that can come from a full panoply of terpenoids that can contribute to the beneficial effects and also reduce any side effects of other cannabinoids. So this is the approach that I've always espoused. And as you mentioned, we're seeing divergence in the industry where many companies are going in the other direction and trying to make CBD isolates, or worse, in my opinion, trying to teach yeast how to make this in the lab. Right now, I think the science is fascinating, but to scale that up, they're going to end up with a very expensive product, no doubt, and it will never have the breadth of capabilities that a properly constituted cannabis extract will. And I firmly believe that.
So let's talk about that goal of that full-bodied cannabis extract for a moment, because we understand what single molecule concoctions would be like, but then when we talk about whole plant medicine, I don't have as clear as a picture. I mean, certainly many of us are doing full ethanol extractions, and we've been using that for a wide variety of ailments, especially cancer patients, for years now in the underground, right? So is it that same kind of picture that we'd be using these new plants for, essentially removing the resin from the trichomes and using it as it is in the plant, or that's just a beginning place and then you process it from there?
Well, it could be processed, but really the key is having the genetics that express the profile that you want for maximum therapeutic effect. And I would mention the same thing applies to better recreational concoctions. If the question were, do I think that we can make better medicine or better adult use cannabis, I'm absolutely convinced of it. So I have an idea in my mind oftentimes of what the best biochemical profile would be for a given condition or a given desired effect. And what we're trying to do in Breeders' Best is see if we can make those available. What we're seeing in the industry is genetic bottleneck, and this is really a byproduct of prohibition, that for decades the premium has been on high THC to the exclusion of everything else. What we've ended up with out there is primarily high THC products with high myrcene, so very prone to produce couch lock, but not optimal in any sense from a therapeutic standpoint, especially, say, for the pain patient that might need to work or study. They're not going to function well on that kind of profile. Then about 10 years ago, CBD became popular as a target for breeding, but we ended up with high CBD and high myrcene, creating the mistaken notion that CBD is sedating, and it really is not. But we're really looking for distinct targets, emphasizing better profiles, perhaps high THC with other terpenoids predominant that aren't going to be sedating, that allow people to concentrate and work, that can elevate mood, particularly in patients who have a chronic condition and may be depressed from that. Additionally, we're really interested in what people now call minor cannabinoids that haven't been available and haven't had the opportunity to show their full therapeutic potential. And I just would cite cannabigerol, CBG, as a cannabinoid that I think is extremely promising from a medical standpoint. And the vast majority of people that may have used cannabis for decades have had no exposure to it.
So we've talked about before when you've been on the podcast that you see many pharmaceutical companies moving towards these single molecule solutions, and when you review their final product, you're like, so this combination may be good, but our goal really should be to breed a plant that is exactly that. So that instead of manufacturing it in a lab, we're just going to grow this plant and then extract from the plant the whole the entirety of the oil, and then you don't have to do additional manufacturing. You know, put it in a capsule or whatever, and hand it on to the patient. What types of plants are you looking for breeders to start bringing you, right? Because I'm sure that there are breeders who have got their life work, right, in the grow room, and they just haven't felt safe to take it anywhere. And so now, perhaps they'll consider Breeders Best as an option, but how do they know whether or not that they should even reach out to you? What are you looking for?
Sure. Well, the place to start is not just that, hey, I've grown something that I think is really good. We need a little more science behind it, and that comes from COAs, Certificates of Analysis. So on a basic level, what we'd be looking for is either THC predominant, CBD predominant plants, but with profiles other than high myrcene. So we're interested in plants that would have a good expression of other terpenoids, whether caryophyllene, linalool, limonene, pinene, any of these would be of interest. And then certainly type 2 plants with a balance of THC and CBD with the same kind of profiles, CBG predominant plants and THCV predominant plants, or by chance, if somebody has a cannabichromene CBC predominant plant, that's a recessive gene. Don't see a lot of it normally. So any of these would be of great interest and would be very promising in future commerce.
So Dale, let's say that somebody is watching and they have one of these plants. Something that's got unique characteristics that kind of generally falls within the boundaries that Dr. Russo is explaining to us. What would it look like? So I'm assuming that we'll give them the contact information at the end. So they make contact, and you talk with them. What would be the steps of kind of bringing them in so that we can give people a picture of how they'd be treated?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to. I have to tap into expertise that is not mine. It would be Ethan's and some other people that we're going to involve to be able to have some confidence that that this particular genetic combination has a lot of promise. We're a new company. We're still, pre-funding, and so we won't be able to throw massive resources at everything that comes our way. We'll have to focus on a few of the very most promising at first as we learn how to walk and then run. But yeah, so the idea is if we find something that seems interesting, then we would, and it would have been submitted by the breeder in the first place. So they've expressed some interest. We would go back to them and say, yeah, it looks like this is something we want to work on with you. We will file provisional patent protection none of this is at any cost to them. We'll file provisional patent protection. This will give us a year to evaluate
in the breeder's name.
In the breeder's name, absolutely. It'll always be in the breeder's name, and owned by the breeder. But during that provisional year, we would have an opportunity to evaluate it more thoroughly, evaluate it chemically and horticulturally, to make sure that it really is viable as a real plant that you can put into larger scale production and bring to more markets, more people. If we get through that, well, and then of course, part of this is we make an agreement with the breeder. The breeder needs his or her own attorney. If they need help identifying an attorney or paying for it, we wouldn't be the ones to try to identify an attorney. We want that to be a completely independent decision. But I think there are some very good attorneys, and the International Cannabis Bar Association has some good ones to choose from that are completely independent of us. But we would make an agreement that would specify a royalty rate and the other things that need to be specified so that they have confidence that they have the right kind of protection, and their attorney gets to review that and make sure that they get advice telling them that, yeah, this is not biased in their favor, this is a fair deal both ways. And then we go to work evaluating it. If after that first year, or sometime during that first year, it looks like it's a go, then we would do a more long-term definitive agreement with guaranteed minimum annual royalties, a specified royalty rate, and full IP protection, again in the breeder's name.
Did you say guaranteed minimum royalties?
Yes. Now what?
That's pretty massive.
And guaranteed, that can sound imprudent. A guaranteed minimum royalty, I've done a lot of plant licensing, and what you do with a guaranteed minimum royalty in most of these situations is you're telling the breeder or whatever the partner is, we think that we can, with our diligence, that we can produce enough revenue that we can pay you this as your royalty, and hopefully a lot more than that. If we ever don't, then the exclusivity of our agreement goes away and we become a non-exclusive licensee, or in some cases we lose our license entirely and all the rights revert back to the breeder. That's a way, one of the things I've learned in doing intellectual property licensing is if you give someone an exclusive license to something, whether it's a plant variety or whatever thing you have, you're betting on them to do all the work. And that's a risk. And if they'll make if they'll give you a guaranteed minimum, then they're putting some skin in the game, and they've got to do the work. They've got to make it happen. And then if things just don't turn out the way they thought it would, and then the way to back out of that in a way that's not doesn't have to be combative or adversarial is to say, we're sorry, we're not going to be able to maintain the exclusivity of these rights. We can't make enough money to pay this royalty. That doesn't mean that the breeder is just left with no options. The breeder has intellectual property that belongs to them. They've got either still a non-exclusive license with us, so we can still try to make money for them, and then they can also, since it's non-exclusive, they can go do what they want to do also.
So I really like the fact that the ownership remains with the original breeder, which gives them a lot more safety. And I'm both surprised and think it's pretty cool that you're approaching this minimum royalty amount. But in this post Phylos debacle world, there's not a lot of people throwing around trust right now when it comes to the breeding scene, right? So let's talk a little bit more about protections for the breeders themselves. The first year, when you wrap up the IP, while you can do your due diligence to make sure that it's really an appropriate target plant, what does that agreement look like? What protections are in it for the breeder to know that you're not, squirreling away the genetics, and then you're going to say, oh, it's not the right plant, and they go away, and then you go ahead and use it anyway?
That's a great question. Typically, a good intellectual property license has audit rights, where there's the licensor, the one that owns the rights, has the right built into the agreement to walk in at any time and inspect, or have someone do that for them. In addition, one of the things that is, I think especially good or attractive about intellectual property licenses relating to actual plant cultivars is that if someone ever tried to do something like that, you're a very simple DNA test away from proving that, you know, these guys that told me they weren't keeping any of my plants kept some of my plants. That's a super feasible test.
This isn't theoretical. You've done this with a wide range of other types of plants. So this isn't like iffy science. This is very clear science.
Absolutely clear. And because there has been a lot of activity in cannabis sequencing and cannabis mapping, it's very accessible to this kind of genetic testing. I'm not saying it's cheap or it happens overnight, but if anyone ever, if they had a concern that had happened, it would be impossible to hide it. And so I think that's one of the reasons that it's great if you can ask people to trust you, but it's even better if you can say, you don't have to trust me. We're transparent. Here's your recourse. Here's how you are protected, and you don't even have to believe us. You've got your own attorney to walk through this with you and hold us accountable. Mm-hmm. And I think transparency and accountability are essential in any business where you want to engender trustworthiness. It starts with transparency and accountability.
Ethan, I know you as a neurologist and a cannabis researcher, but also as a neighbor on Vashon Island, where you're a serious horticulturalist, and a member of the Fruit Club.
Sure.
And I know your perspective goes beyond the law aspects and beyond just the medical benefits. You're a plant nerd. You're into the plant, and what would be your message to breeders who are watching to encourage them to come out? Because we all know that there are these breeders who have not stepped out of the shadows with their life's work plant yet, because it's super aggressive and people are getting taken advantage of all the time. And part of the challenge for both of you with Breeders Best is going to really convince people that this is a safe haven for real plant people. So what would your message to them be to kind of help folks get over the hump to reach out?
Well, I'd say a number of things. First, I'm committed to this. There are lots of things I could do with my time. If I'd been a smart businessman, I would have stayed in neurology practice and retired to the golf course 15 years ago, like my colleagues, but that had zero attraction. So that's one thing. But, to the breeders or the plant people, I'd say, hey, I consider myself one of you, or I'm a wannabe at least. I've been an organic farmer since 1974. I used to I had one of the first Montana certified organic farms and sold vegetables at the farmers market. So I know their ethos. And I appreciate their values. I've met a lot of these people. I realize their quality as individuals and what they're trying to achieve. So I think it's a matter of common goals. And certainly if we have the opportunity to talk one-on-one, I would like to emphasize why I think that this is a good avenue for them. The other aspect is, over the course of 23 years of working in the cannabis space, I've seen how I think it should not be done. So I would like to contribute to finding a better way, and certainly a big part of that is finding the breeding targets that we need to make better medicine.
So once you find these plants and the breeder partners, and you've run your tests and all the ink is dried on the paper, is the plan to take these oils and take them down a pharmaceutical FDA route, or is it more to take it and put them out as medical products, but in what we're thinking about now as a recreational market?
Sure. Well, there are multiple possibilities. That's one of the strengths of this approach. So as it is now, the grower's probably using his or her material themselves or sharing with friends. Some of these people have found a market in California, but that's been extremely difficult too, because of the stringent regulations that are attached to the legal program in California. So already with 40 million people, this is one of the greatest cannabis markets in the world. But I'd emphasize that what we're trying to do applies to people in other states, other countries, and we would really like to see this to be an international movement. But to specifically answer your question, their material might go to a dispensary as flower, or we might want to process into nice extracts that are done ethically, clean extracts, using a variety of techniques. But additionally, I'm also working with a pharmaceutical company that needs better profiles. And so this could provide the breed stock, if you will, for pharmaceutical development. And obviously that's potentially extremely lucrative for the licensee. So I see endless potential to this.
So, Dale, we've all heard horror stories about somebody having a specialty plant and they give it to their one friend with the promise of them not sharing it. They swear, right? and then the cut gets out, right? And there's a perceived loss. How does it work at this level? Say, for example, if you're licensing the plant material to be grown by a third party, or if you are licensing the IP or plant material to a pharmaceutical company, in what manners is that kept safe? Because breeders have good reason to be watching out for getting ripped off, right? Absolutely. And many of us don't understand how these protections work at a 7-8 figure level, right?
Yeah.
So would you just explain that for us so we all get a better picture on how that's protected, so they're not going to get ripped off with you getting ripped off by the licensee. Right.
Well, I think there are 3 layers of protection, and they're all really important. One of the layers is just a physical layer that anyone that we work with, where we put these valuable genetics, they will have to have the right kind of security. Now, that's never perfect, and so that's the main reason. The reason we're filing patents is not just because I'm a patent attorney. It's because when something slips out, you need to be able to have recourse, regardless of whether the person knew that what they received was stolen. You don't want to have to trace the provenance of some plant. If you know that it's yours and it's patent protected, then you can either take the party that's using the plant without authorization and sign them up as a licensee so that they're paying money into that breeder's royalty rate or total royalty, or you get them to stop doing it. And so you've got to have physical security. Patent protection is really important because it does give you that last line of defense in case plants do slip out. But then the one that people don't talk about as much is having very strong agreements with everybody involved. And this is a lot of the work that I've done. I would think in some ways protecting getting the IP protection is the easy part. Finding the right partners and crafting the right kinds of agreements so that no one's burdened by the agreement, but that everyone's protected by the way the agreement is structured, super important. So when we do, as I mentioned, we're the breeder's licensee, but then these other parties are going to be sub-licensees under our rights from the breeder, and those agreements that we have with them will specify very clearly what they can and cannot do with the plant, as well as what kind of security they need to maintain. And all of this is meant just to protect the value that the breeder has created with his or her life's work. And we have to work with partners probably all over the world. I've done that with other kinds of plants all over the world. If you want to get good medicines or good products out to a lot of people, you've got to kind of trust. You've got to find people that are as trustworthy as possible to work with, but then you fill the gaps in the trust with good agreements and good intellectual property protection.
So let's say that there's some people and they're excited, right? And they want to reach out, and we know that you are you're at this nexus point right now where you are fundraising actively, but you're also trying to source plants at the same time so that they kind of come together at the same time, that you start cashing these checks from investors and you have some plants to work with. What kind of time frames are we looking for? Do you want people to reach out to you now? It's like, is it time to, like, call now?
Yeah, it is. As long as we just hope that they'll be patient with us, because some parts of this come at almost no cost. We're all committed to this. We can look at a COA. We can do some of that analysis without having to spend money. But a lot of it, once we find a propagation partner, or once we start doing some of the other things to really prepare this to get it out to people, that will cost money. And so we want every breeder who has something special to trust us, to feel like they can trust us enough to send us in to fill out our form. We have a form that I'll describe in a minute. And to tell us about what they've got and let us begin to evaluate it. But I hope that they will be patient. That many of them have waited a long time, and if they'll wait for us to really be all set up to do this really well, then hopefully we'll be able to reward their patience with some really great performance on our part. But we are starting. We have already 3 special cultivars signed up to non-binding letters of intent, because these people haven't had a chance yet to have an attorney review an agreement. We haven't actually written the agreement, so we have letters of intent saying, hey, we want to do this, you want to do this, we're going to give this a go. We will be turning those into, and we filed provisional patent protection on all of those, but we'll be turning these into definitive agreements and write checks, which will be nice. Part of this too is that when we do a deal with a breeder, they will get some kind of an advance on their royalties, just as a kind of, this is how serious we are, we're writing you a check. They won't retire on that check, but it's better than a stick in the eye. So money, a check that will cash is not bad.
Right on. And in addition to breeders, I mean, since you are actively fundraising, and I know that you've been talking to these folks already, and some of those checks are even in the mail. If there are people who are watching, because there's a lot of decision makers and investors that watch Shaping Fire and follow along, are you interested in incoming contact from people with money to invest as well?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd welcome the opportunity, and I'd like to be able to explain why I think this is so important. And it really, again, represents a distinct approach to the problems in the cannabis industry. We have now over 200 licensed producers in Canada, but for the most part, they're dealing with the same genetics and the same profiles, and it is just not the case that they're all going to survive. What we need is a more focused approach with distinct cultivars, and I think that Breeders Best presents the opportunity for this to happen, and again, to make better medicine.
And I'd like to just add to that, something that I'm really excited about with this is, I was having a conversation at MJ BizCon just yesterday with someone who said, well, I have plant breeders. What's the difference between my employee plant breeders and these breeders? And I said, well, these men and women are independent. They own their IP. Those are 2 big ones right there. But I also said, no matter how much technology you have and how great your plant breeders are, you've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5. I see our connection with the breeder community, which I hope we have and we are committed to living up to. We have a vast army of breeder capacity out there that can look at Ethan's wish list and make it happen. Some of them, they might already have what he wants to bring to the world in their greenhouse or on their shelf. If not, instead of just asking a couple breeders to work on it, we're saying, hey, here's an opportunity. If this interests you, take your passion, take your independence, and do something great with it, and it'll help a lot of people. So I love the whole decentralized, independent it's the biggest R&D department in the history of medicine.
Crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
You're crowdsourcing at its most pure.
We really are, and I see it as an opportunity to help a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
So Dale, so let's say that somebody is a breeder or an investor. Would you outline how you would like them to get in contact with you? And then also, if you're at Emerald Cup this weekend, they're going to have a booth. And how could they come by and talk with you either at the booth, or how do they get a hold of you via the internet?
Yes, we will have a booth. It's a corner booth in the Hall of Flowers. I wrote it down, and it's way over there. I think it's 892. But we'll have a giant sign.
872.
872.
I'll put it in the description below.
Okay, thank you. We also have a website that has just gone live today. On the website, there's an opportunities section, opportunities for plant breeders, and if you click on that, there's a very simple form that requests some information. It's not even, you don't have to fill out all of it. Just your name and tell us what's special about the cultivar, and if you have a COA, you can upload it and we can start to take a look at it. So that's one way for breeders to get in touch.
Is that at breedersbest.com?
Yes, at breedersbest.com. And so that's probably a 3 or 4 minute form. It's meant to be easy and to not make you wish you hadn't ever clicked on it. So and then we also have an email address, invest@breedersbest.com, for anyone who's interested in talking to us about that. And then anyone can write to info@breedersbest.com with any kind of question, and we'll be able to hopefully respond to it in a way that's satisfactory.
So if you're a breeder, you want to go to the online form at breedersbest.com. If you are an investor, you want to email to invest@breedersbest.com.
And that's also on the website.
Also on the website, yeah. All right. And then if you have another question, or you want to get in contact for some other reason, there's info@breedersbest.com. All right. So all this will be down in the description as well. Let's end with you, Ethan. So you and I both come from the medical side of cannabis, and one thing that I've learned from working with breeders with the Shaping Fire show is that, yeah, breeders enjoy the botany and the genetics, but almost all of them started because they cared about patients. Would you finish us off by speaking briefly about what you see as the real human potential in this approach, and why, like you said, you could be doing anything, and so why are you putting your heart and time into this specifically? And then
Right.
We'll end with that.
Well, this is the antithesis of the traditional approach to making medicine, which is, you identify a receptor and computer design a molecule that'll fit there with the highest potency and affinity, and then they find out later it's got disastrous side effects. With cannabis, we're dealing with a plant that, as humans have used for thousands of years, our bodies know how to deal with this plant. But heretofore, we haven't had the best ability to get the profiles that would be optimized. And so while aspects of the industry have gone for the single molecule, and again, they're thinking in a one-size-fits-all, cannabis isn't like that. Here, we really have the opportunity to have individualized medicine. So again, depending on the patient's profile, which would come from really knowing them, their history and their needs, we can really suggest a profile that might be better than anything else that they could get, whether it's conventional medicine or just garden variety cannabis off the shelf in the dispensary. I see a future in which we can really get things so that we have truly great medicine that's going to fit a particular person's needs. Hopefully good medicine that's therapeutic, that is going to make them feel better and not introduce new problems.
Right on. So if you are interested in participating with Breeders Best and getting to know more, I encourage you to check out the website or Dale this weekend at Emerald Cup. Thank you both for inviting me. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to chat with you about this new project. It's pretty exciting.
you.
And so for Dale Hunt, Dr. Ethan Russo, and myself, Shango of Shaping Fire, thank you for watching.